Welcome to Let Jesus Be Your Doctor, the true path to healing for body and soul.
What if the very instinct that keeps you alive, your biological drive to fight back, to brace yourself, to resist when you're threatened, what if that is the exact same instinct that's actually keeping you sick?
That's a heavy thought.
Right. I mean, what if the ultimate shortcut to profound healing requires you to do the absolute hardest thing a human being can do?
Which is to stop fighting.
Exactly. To drop your defenses and simply surrender. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are exploring a radical framework that demands exactly that. And we are stepping away from the rapid-fire data points, the frenetic energy of the daily news cycle.
Yeah, we really need to slow down for this one.
We do. We are entering a space that requires a much slower, calmer, and more meditative kind of attention. So I want to invite you, the listener, right now, to take a conscious breath.
Just let it out.
Yeah. Whether you are walking, driving, or just sitting quietly, let the urgency of the day fall away for a moment. Because we're unpacking a source text today that isn't just meant to be analyzed.
No, it's really designed to be experienced.
Yes.
It is a text that requires us to fundamentally shift our pacing. I mean, if we approach this with our usual modern urgency, trying to extract the bullet points and move on, we will completely miss the architecture of what is being built here.
So true.
The concepts we are looking at today operate on a completely different frequency, one that demands contemplation rather than just, comprehension.
Right, exactly. So our source material today is a script from a deeply spiritual, highly structured audio program. Specifically, we're looking at Season 1, Week 2, Day 5, Episode 12.
That's a very specific location in the curriculum.
It is. The overarching title of the program is Let Jesus Be Your Doctor, the True Path to Healing for Body and Soul. And the specific theme we are dissecting in this installment is In Harmony with God's Will, Finding Peace in the Divine Order.
It's a profound title.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to act as your guides through this remarkable framework. We aren't here to preach to you or, force a belief system on you.
Right? We're looking at the mechanics. Exactly. The profound psychological, physiological, and spiritual mechanics of this text. We want to sit with these ancient and modern voices, turn their ideas over in our hands, and understand exactly how this specific framework approaches the profound human desire for inner peace and physical healing.
And the text doesn't waste any time. Right out of the gate, it establishes a foundational premise that really anchors everything else we will discuss today.
Which is?
It draws a massive distinction between the concept of agreement and the concept of harmony. Harmony with God's will, according to this framework, is not just a passive intellectual nod where you say, sure, I agree with how things are going.
Like checking a box.
Exactly. It is defined as a deep, radical trust that absolutely everything, every triumph, every tragedy, every mundane moment is happening within a perfect divine order.
Wow.
And the text argues that when an individual actually trusts this fundamentally, an inner peace emerges that is completely unattached to external circumstances.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is an absolutely staggering claim to make.
It is.
The idea that a human being can cultivate a state of peace that is totally divorced from the chaos, the pain, or the unpredictability of what is actually happening to them or around them.
It sounds impossible.
Right. So can you help us understand the architecture of this? How does this specific, highly theological concept of divine order serve as the actual functional foundation for the healing of the body and the soul?
Well,
Because that is the promise of the text, right? That this harmony is the path to healing. How does belief in an order lead to physiological or psychological restoration?
so to understand the how, we have to look at the root mechanics of human distress.
Okay.
So much of our suffering, whether it originates in the mind as anxiety or depression, or eventually manifests in the physical body as chronic illness or fatigue, it stems from a profound underlying sense of disorder.
Like a lack of control.
Exactly. It is the terrifying feeling of chaos, the feeling that reality is out of control, that we are victims of random, meaningless circumstance, or that something is inherently unfixably wrong with our lives.
No.
When this text introduces the concept of the divine order, it is offering a radical structural reframing of reality itself. Think about what happens in the human body when we perceive chaos and threat.
We tense up.
We go into a state of chronic resistance. Our sympathetic nervous system locks into fight or flight. We pump cortisol and adrenaline into our bloodstream. Our muscles tense. Our breathing becomes shallow. And our immune system is suppressed.
So we are literally fighting the current of reality.
Exactly.
We are bracing for impact constantly.
Precisely. But if you adopt the framework of this text, if you genuinely deeply trust that there is an underlying loving order to everything, even the excruciatingly painful things that perception of threat dissolves,
You stop fighting.
you stop fighting. And in that cessation of resistance, the physiological and spiritual panic responses begin to quiet down. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, activates. Your soul, for lack of a better term, finds a resting place. And from a purely biological and psychological standpoint, a resting organism creates the only environment where true cellular and emotional healing can actually take place.
That makes so much sense.
The text is arguing that spiritual trust is the ultimate catalyst for physical and mental restoration.
That reframing is incredibly powerful. And the source program doesn't just leave this as a floating abstraction. It grounds this thesis in specific historical voice.
Yeah, it brings in some heavy hitters.
It does. To truly grasp the gravity of this divine order, the text directs us to the precise writings of a fascinating 20th century figure named Bertha Dudde.
Bertha Dudde.
Yeah. For some context, she was a simple German dressmaker who, starting in the late 1930s, claimed to receive thousands of inner dictations, spiritual proclamations about the nature of the cosmos, the soul, and God.
It's quite a story.
It really is. Our text pulls from proclamation number 8605, which is explicitly titled, "The Principle of Divine Order is Love."
The title says it all.
Right. I'm going to share the opening of this specific proclamation, and I want us to really listen to the absolute nature of the language used here.
Go ahead.
Quote, "In my will lies the eternal order. Whoever submits to this order lives in peace. For everything that happens serves the return to the light. Nothing is without meaning, nothing without love." End quote.
What's fascinating here is the sheer uncompromising totality of that statement.
Yeah, everything that happens.
Exactly. It does not say the good things serve the return to the light. It does not say the blessings are full of meaning. It says everything.
Everything.
It is a complete and total worldview shift that absolutely annihilates the concept of meaningless suffering.
And meaningless suffering is huge. I mean, in the modern world, meaningless suffering is perhaps our greatest psychological terror. The idea that our pain has no point, that it is just random cruelty.
Right. But Dudde's framework insists that within this eternal order, even the deepest hardships, the most confusing trials, and the darkest nights are actively operating as instruments of a loving return.
Nothing is wasted.
Nothing is wasted. Nothing is without love.
It provides an incredibly secure container for human suffering. And the text goes so much deeper into the mechanics of this. It essentially provides an origin story for the human soul.
Tracing exactly how we interact with this divine order.
Exactly. We have a substantial excerpt here from Bertha Dudde's dictations, translated exactly from the source text. And as we promised at the top of the show, we are not going to rush this.
No, we need to take our time.
We are going to walk through her exact words, piece by piece, and truly examine the architecture of what she is proposing. Let's start with the first segment.
Okay.
She writes, "You must move entirely in divine order. Then you will be perfect again, as in the beginning of your being."
Wow. Let's pause there.
Yeah, please.
This establishes the fundamental duality of the human condition according to this spiritual framework. Notice the spatial language.
Spatial language.
Yeah, there's an inside the divine order and an outside.
I see. Let me read the next sentence. "As long as you still stand outside this divine order, you are flawed and cannot connect with God."
Right. So existing outside of it is what generates the human experience of being flawed, broken, or disconnected. But what is truly beautiful here is the implication of that first phrase, perfect again, as in the beginning of your being.
Implying we started out perfect.
Exactly. It asserts that our original baseline state was one of absolute perfection and alignment.
So the feeling of brokenness, the anxiety, the disconnection that we all carry as a chronic modern condition.
That isn't our true nature. It isn't who we actually are. It is simply a temporary symptom, a side effect of currently standing geographically, so to speak, outside the borders of the divine order.
Which naturally leads to the most important question. If our natural state was perfect alignment, how did we end up outside of it?
How did we leave?
Yeah. What does it actually mean to step outside of a divine order? The text anticipates this, and Dudde addresses it directly in the next segment.
Let's hear it.
She asks, what contradicts this eternal law?
And her answer.
Only lovelessness. For the principle of divine order is love. She continues, if the essence of love is lost, then its nature is reversed.
That's a profound statement.
It gets heavier. then all qualities emerge which contradict the once divine being and shape it into a distorted image of God.
A distorted image.
Yeah, which now also loses all qualities inherent in a divine creature.
This is a brilliant philosophical distillation. If the core principle of the divine order is love, then the only thing that exists outside of it is lovelessness.
It's an absence.
Exactly. It echoes the classical philosophical arguments of thinkers like Augustine, who argued that evil or brokenness isn't a thing in itself. It is simply the absence of a thing.
Right.
It is a provocio boni, a deprivation of good. Just as cold is not an energy, but merely the absence of heat.
Or darkness is just the absence of light.
Precisely. Here, Dudde is saying that becoming a distorted image isn't about acquiring some evil substance. It is simply the tragic result of losing the essence of love. When love vacates the premises, the nature of the being automatically reverses.
A distorted image of God. That is such a haunting way to describe the pain of the human condition.
It really is.
We're misshapen simply because we are empty of our original substance. But again, how did that happen? Why would a perfectly aligned being ever choose to lose that essence?
That's the million-dollar question.
Dudde takes us back to the very mechanism of creation to explain this. Let's look at the next part of the excerpt.
Okay.
The primal element of God is love. All beings have emerged from him and are therefore also love in themselves.
Okay, so we start as love.
Right. But since eternal love does not force but leaves freedom to all created beings, the being could also resist the law of eternal order.
Ah, free will.
Exactly. She says it could think and will the opposite, which means as much as that it could step out of the circuit of divine love and change itself into a being that stood outside the divine order.
This is perhaps the most crucial theological and psychological cornerstone in the entire program, the profound paradox of free will.
Why would any being leave paradise?
The answer is freedom. Notice the phrase, eternal love does not force. By definition, within this framework, force and coercion are entirely incompatible with love.
Because if it's forced, it's not love.
Exactly. If God simply programmed us to remain perfectly aligned, we would be automatons. We would be machines, not beloved creations. For love to be authentic, for it to be real, the created being had to possess the absolute capacity to reject it.
We had to have the choice.
We had to have the sovereign ability to think, to will, and to choose the exact opposite of the eternal order. And by exercising that immense, terrifying freedom in opposition to love, the being actively stepped out of what she calls the circuit of divine love.
You know, as I was reading that specific phrase in the source material, step out of the circuit of divine love, and later when she mentions the divine radiation of love, a very vivid mechanical analogy came to mind.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
I think it helps clarify this. Imagine the human soul is essentially a highly advanced, brilliantly engineered, solar-powered device.
Okay, solar-powered.
Yeah, its natural state, the exact way it's manufactured, designed it to function at peak perfection, is to have its solar panels turned directly toward the sun, constantly soaking in those rays, operating in a seamless circuit.
Right, a closed loop of energy.
Exactly. But because this particular device was imbued with a radical, autonomous artificial intelligence, it has total freedom of movement. It has the agency to literally rotate its panels, to turn its back on the sun and face out into the freezing, empty, dark void of deep space.
I think that is an exceptionally precise way to visualize the mechanics of what Dude is describing. Because what happens next in that scenario?
Right. When the device turns away from the sun, the battery immediately begins to drain. The internal heating systems start to fail. The diagnostic lights start flashing red.
Chaos ensues.
Total chaos. The whole system experiences what we would call flaws and malfunctions. It gets incredibly cold and dark. And this is the vital part. The sun hasn't changed.
The sun is still shining.
The sun hasn't turned off. The sun isn't angrily punishing the solar device for turning around. The device is simply tragically experiencing the natural, inevitable consequence of consciously turning its power receptors away from its only power source.
Exactly. The suffering, the freezing, the draining of the battery, it isn't a punitive measure inflicted by a wrathful creator.
No.
It is just the basic physics of the situation. It is the natural result of a solar-powered entity choosing the shatters. And this deeply reframes how we view spiritual and physical suffering. Let's look at how Dudde explicitly describes the exact consequence of that turn.
Okay, here is the next segment of her dictation.
Yeah.
It did this, it became loveless, because it no longer accepted the divine radiation of love.
It turned the panels away.
Exactly. It became a completely different kind of being than it had originally emerged from God. And as long as it moves outside the divine order, it is distant from God and unhappy.
There it is. It no longer accepted the divine radiation of love. It consciously rotated the panels away.
And the result is stated with such heartbreaking simplicity. It became distant from God and unhappy.
By refusing the light, it fundamentally changed its own operating nature.
But the profound beauty of this specific spiritual text is that it does not leave the listener stranded in the dark.
Thank goodness.
Right. It immediately offers the mechanical solution for the return. Let's read the next deeply hopeful segment.
I'm ready.
But it can change back at any time to the former perfect being that it originally was.
At any time. Let's just sit with that.
It's beautiful. Always, however, this requires a voluntary insertion into the divine law.
Voluntary.
Yeah, she says it requires a completely changed thinking and willing. It requires a transformation of love and free will.
And what happens then?
Then the being integrates itself back into the law of divine order and can approach God again and finally merge completely with him.
There is an immense sweeping grace embedded in those three words, at any time. In this framework, there is no event horizon. There is no point of no return.
The battery can be at 1%?
Yes. The system can be freezing over, but the option to turn around is always available. However, there is a strict condition which brings us right back to the core premise of free will. It requires a voluntary insertion.
Just as the departure from the sun was an autonomous act of free will, the return must be equally voluntary.
Nobody can rotate the panels for you. God will not force the panels back toward the light because that would violate the rule that eternal love does not force.
It requires you to completely change your thinking, to consciously engage your will, and to choose love.
And the moment that voluntary rotation happens, the text promises that the being begins to integrate back into the order, recharging and eventually merging back into perfect harmony.
But, and this is important, the text also delivers a very stark, unflinching look at the reality of choosing not to turn back.
Right, there are consequences.
This is the final piece of the Bertha Dudde excerpt we are analyzing today.
Right.
And it paints a vivid picture of the alternative.
Let's hear it.
She writes, "Without love, the being is the property of the opponent of God. Without love, it is in defense against the divine current of love power."
In defense against.
Yeah, and she concludes, it is darkened and powerless and therefore also unhappy because it is far from God.
The phrasing here is incredibly evocative. Being in defense against the divine current of love power, this implies that the love of God is not scarce.
No.
It is not something you have to hunt down or earn. It is a constant, rushing, mighty current like a massive river.
Right.
And when we exist in a state of lovelessness, of resistance, we are actively expending our own limited energy to build a dam, to put up a shield, to defend ourselves against the very water that would quench our thirst. We remain darkened and powerless simply because we are exhausting our batteries fighting against the current of love.
Which provides the perfect transition from this sweeping cosmic macro-theological narrative down to the practical everyday reality of human healing.
The ground level.
Exactly. If the root of our profound unhappiness and illness is that we're exhausting ourselves in defense against the divine current, then the logical functional solution is to drop the defenses,
To dismantle the dam.
to surrender. And to explore the actual anatomy of what surrender looks like, the program introduces the teachings of Bruno Gröning.
Yes. For those who might not be familiar, Bruno Gröning was a highly influential yet controversial spiritual healer in post-World War II Germany.
A very specific historical context.
Very specific. You have to picture it, a country in absolute ruins, infrastructure destroyed, millions of people traumatized, grieving, and suffering from catastrophic physical and psychological wounds.
There's unimaginable pain.
And in the midst of that utter devastation, Gröning began drawing massive crowds. And he was speaking not about complex medical interventions, but about something he called the Heilstrom, the healing stream.
The Heilstrom.
He taught that there is a literal, accessible spiritual current of divine life force, and that by tuning into it, the body and soul could experience profound restoration.
And the source text isolates one very specific, very powerful quote from Gröning to anchor this section. Again, I want to deliver his exact words as provided in the program.
Right.
When a person stands in the divine will, they're at peace no matter what happens around them.
We really need to look closely at the language Gröning uses here. He says, stands in.
Right, stands in.
He doesn't say agrees with from a safe distance. To stand in the divine will implies an immersive, physical, total grounding, like planting your feet firmly in the middle of a rushing river.
Yeah.
And the second half of the quote is where the true challenge lies, no matter what happens around them.
That's the hard part.
It loops us all the way back to the opening hook of our deep dive. Gröning is asserting that true, unshakable peace is not dependent on the external world finally organizing itself to suit your preferences.
It doesn't arrive when your bank account hits a certain number.
Or when your medical tests come back clear. Or when your interpersonal conflicts are all resolved. Peace is generated purely by your internal alignment with that divine current.
It is a citadel that remains completely undisturbed by the storm outside.
Exactly.
And to really solidify this radical concept, the source text does something structurally brilliant. It curates a chorus of voices.
I love this part of the text.
It's so good. It pulls together quotes from vastly different historical eras, different continents, and different theological backgrounds, layering them together to prove this one single unifying point under the theme of letting go of resistance.
It shows the universality of the concept.
It really does. Hearing these exact quotes stacked back to back in the script is incredibly striking, and I want to share them with you right now.
Let's do.
First, the text pulls from ancient scripture, specifically the book of Ezekiel, chapter 36, verse 26. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. Then it jumps forward thousands of years to the 15th century mystic Thomas à Kempis, who wrote, "The more you resist, the more you suffer. Let God do the work in you, and there will be peace."
Wow.
Next, it brings in the 20th century Italian mystic Luisa Piccarreta, who offers this deeply physical observation. Whoever does not bend feels the pressure. Whoever surrenders feels the embrace.
That imagery is stunning.
And finally, it concludes the chorus with the modern 20th century theologian Derek Prince. Resistance is the root of restlessness. Surrender is the root of healing.
It is a remarkable synthesis of thought. You have Ezekiel identifying that a fundamental structural internal transformation, a completely new heart, is the prerequisite for this process.
Right?
Then, Thomas à Kempis, writing during a time of plagues and massive societal upheaval in Europe, identifies the exact mechanical cause of suffering: resistance.
The more you resist, the more you suffer.
He recognized, centuries before modern psychology, that fighting reality multiplies pain. Luisa Piccarreta then translates that into a visceral, somatic metaphor.
The pressure versus the embrace.
The choice between the crushing pressure of standing rigid against a force versus the comforting embrace of yielding to it. And Derek Prince ties it all directly back to the theme of our text, drawing a straight line from the spiritual act of surrender to the physical and psychological reality of healing.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. And I want to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who is currently walking through an absolute nightmare.
It's important.
A terrible diagnosis, a bitter divorce, a massive financial collapse. Human biology, millions of years of evolutionary survival instinct, is hardwired to fight.
Yes.
When we encounter a threat, when we feel the pressure Piccarreta mentions, our automatic physiological response is to brace ourselves, to push back, to resist with everything we have.
It's natural.
How on earth do we reconcile our deepest, most ingrained biological imperative to fight for our lives with this towering spiritual demand to just stop, bend, and surrender? It feels dangerously counterintuitive. It feels like giving up.
You are hitting on the exact crux of why this is so difficult. It is completely counterintuitive to our base survival instincts. Our biology screams at us to fight.
Screams at us.
But this spiritual framework is explicitly asking us to transcend our baseline biology. To understand how this works, we have to unpack the ultimate guiding principle that the text extracts from this chorus of voices.
And what is that principle?
The principle is resistance binds, surrender frees.
Resistance binds, surrender frees.
In our modern culture, we have deeply conflated resistance with strength. We use martial language for everything. We say, I am battling cancer, or I am fighting this depression, or I am wrestling with this problem.
You do. Everything is a war.
We view surrender as the ultimate weakness, as waving the white flag and letting the enemy win, but the text is demanding that we completely redefine what strength actually is. True strength in the specific spiritual ecosystem is not about violently forcing an outcome. It is not about rigidly demanding that the universe conform to your immediate desires.
So what is it?
True strength is possessing the immense, quiet courage required to yield your incredibly limited human perspective to the infinite wisdom of divine grace. Think about the word binds. When you resist a circumstance you cannot change, you become psychologically and biologically tethered to it.
You're stuck to it.
Your obsession with fighting it becomes your prison. Your cortisol spikes, your body degrades. But when you surrender, when you have the courage to say, I do not understand this pain, but I trust the divine order within it, you are immediately freed from the exhausting, impossible task of controlling the universe.
Wow.
Surrender isn't giving up.
No.
It is actively shifting the burden of reality off your own shoulders and onto the divine current.
Resistance binds. Surrender frees. That is a total paradigm shift. It completely upends how we approach hardship.
It really does.
But the authors of this program clearly understand that intellectualizing surrender is one thing, and actually executing it on a Tuesday morning when your life is falling apart is entirely different.
Theory versus practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They know we need practical tools. So the script transitions into a profoundly practical segment called Radio Heilstrom.
Radio Heilstrom.
This is designed to take these lofty cosmic theological concepts and ground them into immediate, actionable practice. And I want to invite you, the listener, to treat this next segment of our deep dives not just as an analysis, but as an exploration of a real-time exercise. Let's walk through the exact steps the text provides.
It's a vital pivot in the text. Moving from theory to practice is where the actual transformation happens, and the steps they outline are incredibly clear and accessible.
The first step in the Radio Heilstrom practice is called centering and Loslassen.
Loslassen.
Yeah, Loslassen is a wonderful German word that essentially means letting go, releasing your grip, unclenching.
I love that. Unclenching.
The text asks the listener to sit quietly, to literally close their eyes, and to take a deep, grounding breath. And then it offers a very simple, very direct internal prayer to initiate the process. Lord, align my heart to your will.
Just that simple phrase.
It brings back the wisdom of Thomas à Kempis here, reminding us of his promise. The man has peace when he bows to the divine will. The instruction is to literally, physically feel the muscular tension leaving your body as you say those words.
And immediately following that centering breath, the text reinforces what it calls the basic truth. This is a critical safety measure before moving deeper into the practice.
A safety measure.
Yeah, the text reminds the listener, God's will is never coercion. We established this earlier with Bertha Dudde's writings about free will. God's will is the essence of love, and it is the only path that generates true peace. The text quotes Dude one more time to anchor this. To stand in the divine will means to walk in the light. It is crucial to remember this basic truth so that your subconscious knows you are not surrendering your autonomy to a tyrant, but rather yielding to a profoundly loving light.
That makes a lot of sense. So with that foundation of safety established, the text guides the listener into a fascinating psychological and spiritual exercise called distinguishing the two voices in you.
The two voices.
The program asks you to bring to mind a specific, simple decision you need to make today. Could be anything. And then it asks you to pause and consciously observe the two very distinct internal voices that will inevitably start debating in your head.
We all know those voices.
We do. And the text categorizes these two voices with remarkable clarity. First, there's voice A, which represents the voice of our own will.
Voice A.
The text describes the signature characteristics of this voice. It is loud, it is restless, it is urgent, and it is always trying to force something to happen on a timeline.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Then there is voice B, which represents the voice of the divine will. The signature of this voice is completely different. It is quiet, it is peaceful, it is still, it is incredibly simple, and crucially, it operates entirely without pressure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how human beings operate, this distinction between voice A and voice B is incredibly revealing. Let's look at the quote the text provides from Derek Prince right after this voice exercise.
Okay, what does he say?
He says, "The will of God is never complicated, the will of man is."
Wow.
We really need to pause and examine our cultural obsession with complexity. Why do human beings automatically equate complexity with value and importance?
That's a great question.
We have this subconscious bias that if a decision isn't agonizing, if a strategic plan isn't incredibly convoluted and stressful, it must not be significant or correct. We inherently trust the loud, urgent, complicated voice A because all that noise feels like we are doing the hard work.
Right, the suffering proves we care.
Exactly. But the text insists that this is a deception. The divine operates in ultimate simplicity.
I want to build on that with a metaphor because I think distinguishing these voices is the hardest part of the practice.
Please do.
Imagine your mind is the cockpit of a commercial airliner flying through a storm. Voice A is the master alarm system.
Oh, the alarms.
It's the flashing red lights, the klaxons blaring, the automated voice screaming, pull up terrain, pull up P. It is panicked, it demands immediate, jerky reactions, and it floods your system with adrenaline. That's our human will, driven by the amygdala, terrified of losing control.
Terrifying. And voice B.
Voice B, on the other hand, is the gyroscopic artificial horizon instrument on the dashboard. It doesn't make a sound. It doesn't flash. It simply, quietly, steadily shows you exactly where the true horizon is, regardless of the storm outside.
That's beautiful.
We have to actively choose to look away from the flashing red lights to focus on the quiet truth of the gyroscope.
That is a phenomenal analogy. And the text acknowledges how difficult it is to look away from those flashing red alarms. We are addicted to the urgency.
We really are.
Which is exactly why the text provides an ultimate foolproof litmus test for navigating between these two voices. When you are standing at a crossroads and voice A is screaming while voice B is whispering, the text instructs you to ask one simple inward question.
And what's the question?
Lord, where is your peace? Because within this specific spiritual framework, peace is the explicit, undeniable, unmistakable signature of the divine will. It is the tracking beacon. Wherever the genuine peace resides, that is exactly where the divine will is leading.
Which flows seamlessly into the next and perhaps most revolutionary section of the practical guide. The text moves from the mind directly into the body.
Yes?
It teaches us how to use our own physical form as a highly sensitive spiritual compass. This is the inner agreement exercise.
Yeah.
And the instructions are delightfully literal.
Literal in what way?
The text asks you to actually place your hand on your heart to make the inquiry physical. And while holding your hand over your heart, you ask inwardly, Lord, what do you want me to do?
This is where the profound, undeniable connection between somatic intelligence and spiritual guidance is highlighted. The text outlines a highly specific, easily readable physical and spiritual feedback loop to help you interpret the answer to that question. It relies on interoception, your ability to feel the internal sensations of your own body.
Exactly. I'm going to meticulously break down this feedback loop exactly as it is outlined in the source text because it is so functional and practical. You ask the question, holding the decision in your mind, and then you pay strict attention to your interior physical state.
Right.
The text lays out 4 clear signals. First, does it become expansive in you? Does your chest literally feel like it is opening up? That sensation of expansion is God's agreement.
Expansive.
Second, does it become tight or heavy? Does your stomach knot up or your chest constrict? That feeling of tightness means it is not God's way.
Tightness is a no.
Third, does it become bright and light? If there is a sense of internal illumination or lightness, you should take the step.
Take the step.
Fourth, does it become dark or burdened? If a heavy shadow falls over your mood or body, then you must wait.
It is brilliant in its absolute simplicity. It bypasses the overthinking brain entirely. And the text weaves the mystic Louisa Picaretta back in here to validate this physical metric.
What does she say?
She is quoted as saying, "The divine will speaks in the heart through light and expansiveness." This is a crucial clarification. Seeking divine guidance isn't about waiting for a booming, audible voice from the clouds to give you a set of coordinates.
Right.
It is about developing the sensitivity to read the subtle, physiological, and spiritual responses of your own nervous system and heart. Expansion, breath, and light equate to a divine yes. Constriction, breath holding, and darkness equate to a divine no or wait.
To ensure this doesn't just remain a theoretical concept, the text synthesizes all of this into a daily mini ritual for decisions.
A mini ritual.
It's a protocol you can apply to massive life choices or tiny daily dilemmas. The ritual always begins with the foundational prayer of surrender, modeled after Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not as I will, but as you will, Lord.
A baseline of surrender.
Once you have established that baseline of surrender, the text gives you 3 specific diagnostic checks to run your decision through. Can you break those 3 checks down for us?
Certainly. Let's imagine you were considering taking a new job in a different city. Check 1 is Profit Frieden, which translates to check the peace.
Check the peace.
You visualize taking the job. If a profound sense of peace settles over you, the text explicitly says peace means wider, or continue, go forward.
Okay.
However, if visualizing the move fills you with a deep, churning restlessness, what the text calls unruh, you must pause. You do not act. Restlessness is the absolute red light of the divine order.
Unruh is a red light. Got it.
Check 2 is Prüf die Liebe. Check the love. You ask yourself a very blunt, unsparing question. Does this decision lead to an increase in love, or does it lead away from love? Does it make me more compassionate or more isolated and ruthless?
That's a hard question to ask yourself.
It is. But given everything we learned from Bertha Dudde about love being the very atomic structure of the divine order, any decision that decreases the net amount of love in your life is inherently outside the divine will.
Wow. And the third check.
Finally, check 3 is prufa de ordinum. Check the order. God's will always brings a sense of fundamental order, and it never authors chaos. To anchor this final check, the text cites another powerful line from Bertha Dudde: where there is disorder, I am not.
Where there is disorder, I am not.
If a decision breeds chaos, confusion, deceit, or relational disorder, it is a sure sign that the frantic human will, voice A, has seized the controls.
So what does this all mean for us, practically speaking, today? I want to ask a vital question about the sheer audacity of this framework. We live in a society suffering from terminal information overload.
Terminal overload, yes.
When we have to make a decision, we compile spreadsheets, we weigh pros and cons, we consult algorithms, we seek out 5 different expert opinions, and we drown ourselves in data trying to optimize our choices.
We optimize everything.
Right. So in that context, how incredibly revolutionary is it to be told by this text to simply stop, place a hand on your chest, and use your own internal sense of expansiveness and peace as your ultimate overriding decision-making metric? It feels almost rebellious.
It is entirely countercultural. It is an act of spiritual rebellion against the age of big data. We have completely outsourced our decision-making, and by extension our intuition, to external metrics. We trust the spreadsheet more than our soul.
It's so true.
This text is extending an invitation to engage in a radical reclamation of internal, somatic, and spiritual intelligence. It is proposing a fascinating truth. The most sophisticated supercomputer in the world, processing trillions of variables, cannot compute the subtle nuances of the divine order for your specific life. But a surrendered, quieted human heart can feel its exact coordinates instantly. It is a profound leveling of the playing field. You don't need a PhD in analytics to know if a choice makes your chest feel tight or expansive.
You don't.
You don't need wealth to access the Hailstrom. You just need the courage to be still, to be rigorously honest with yourself, and to trust the physical feedback of your own spirit.
And the program brings all of these threads, the cosmic order, the physical surrender, the internal checks together into one final culminating exercise.
The final exercise.
It is a guide for walking step by step in the divine will regarding a specific unresolved issue in your life. The text asks the listener to actively bring to mind an area where they desperately need clarity. It could be navigating a fractured relationship, deciding on a terrifying health step, figuring out how to heal from a deep hurt, or choosing a new life path.
A real, tangible problem.
And to navigate this specific issue, the text provides a sequence of 3 vital questions.
These 3 questions essentially form a perfect fail-safe map for navigating deep uncertainty. Let's outline them. Question 1 establishes the baseline trajectory. Lord, is this path your will? And as we have just extensively covered, the way you listen for the answer to this is not to wait for a booming voice, but to wait for the somatic sensation of profound peace or tight restlessness.
Right.
But question 2 is where the ego really gets tested and where many of us stumble. Lord, what is the next small step?
I really want to pause and hover on that second question, because the text makes a profound point here about the nature of divine guidance that we need to emphasize. It explicitly notes that the divine will almost always reveals itself sequentially, step by step, and almost never as a massive, fully illuminated master plan.
Yes, and this directly addresses one of the major sources of our modern anxiety. The human ego, voice A, desperately wants the whole map.
We want the 10-year strategic plan.
We want it guaranteed in writing, notarized, and risk assessed before we are willing to take a single step forward. But the text teaches that demanding the whole picture up front is actually just a sophisticated form of control.
A form of control.
It is the human will demanding absolute certainty so it doesn't have to rely on faith. The divine will, however, requires an ongoing relational trust. It functions like a lantern in the dark. It gives you just enough light to see the very next small step in front of you, nothing more.
Just the next step.
You have to take that single step in peace, and only then is the subsequent step illuminated. It is designed to keep you in constant, dependent communion with the source of the light, rather than grabbing the map and running off on your own.
It's incredibly humbling. But paradoxically, it's also a massive relief. You don't have to figure out the next decade of your life today. You literally only have to figure out the very next small, peaceful step.
Which brings us to the third question.
And that brings us to the third and final question in the sequence. Lord, Give me the strength to do what you want.
To anchor this final, crucial step, the text provides a beautiful, stabilizing quote from the 16th century Spanish mystic John of the Cross. He wrote, "God's will is sweet, but man needs grace to do it."
Man needs grace to do it.
Including, this quote acts as a crucial theological and psychological safety net for the listener. It actively removes the crushing burden of performance from the believer. The authors of the text are deeply acknowledging human frailty here.
How so?
They know that even when you have successfully quieted voice A, even when you clearly know the next small step, and even when you know in your bones that it will ultimately bring peace, your human nature might still shrink back in terror.
Because it's scary.
Because that step is scary, or requires painful sacrifice, or involves letting go of something you love. John of the Cross reminds us that we are not expected to manufacture the sheer willpower to surrender all on our own.
That is a relief.
Even the power to yield, the strength to let go, must be granted from the outside as a gift of grace. We don't have to muscle our way into surrender. We simply have to have the humility to ask for the strength to do it.
It is a framework of complete, total reliance on the divine current, from the initial quiet moment of decision-making all the way through to the physical execution of the action. And to seal this entire profound process, the program provides a closing prayer.
The closing prayer.
As instructed by the structure of the show today, I'm going to maintain our slow, reverent pace, and I'm going to read the exact closing prayer provided in the text. I invite you, the listener, wherever you are, to let these words wash over you and truly absorb their meaning.
Take your time.
Lord Jesus Christ, lead my will into your will. Let me find what you have prepared for me. Order my life according to your light. Give me peace where your path is, and take my peace away where I go astray. I surrender myself to you so that your holy will may be done in me.
I'm always struck by that one specific line, "Take my peace away where I go astray."
That's a bold thing to pray for.
What an incredibly brave, radical thing to actively pray for. To intentionally ask for the deep discomfort of restlessness, to request that your own peace be shattered, simply to serve as an early warning system that you are drifting from the light.
Wow.
That is the prayer of someone who has truly, finally decided that they desire the perfection of the divine order more than they desire their own temporary artificial comfort.
It is a profound level of trust. And as we reach the very end of today's source text, the script delivers a beautiful, formal blessing to the listener. To honor the material, I want to offer this blessing to you right now, reading it exactly as it was written for the program's audience.
Let's hear it.
May you live today in this peace, in the trust that God's will is love. May his light guide you and your heart rest in divine order. Amen. The script also leaves us with a small teaser mentioning the title of the next text in their series, which gives us a glimpse into where this spiritual journey goes next. The next text is titled, When God is Silent, Trust in Times of Trial.
Oh, that's powerful.
Which honestly feels like the completely natural, necessary progression. Once you learn how to seek and hear the voice of peace, the next great spiritual hurdle is learning how to survive the seasons when that voice seems to vanish entirely.
It absolutely is the necessary next step in the curriculum of trust. And as we officially close out our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you transition back into the speed and noise of your daily life.
A final thought. Let's have it.
We've spent this entire hour discussing how to find harmony with God's will and how to read our internal somatic compass of peace and expansiveness. If we accept the premise of this text that God's will is not a rigid, punitive tightrope that we have to blindly guess our way across, but rather an ongoing, gentle, relational conversation experienced through the living feedback of our own internal peace, how might that completely change the way we view our past mistakes? Perhaps stepping out of the circuit of love, making a selfish decision, choosing voice A, and subsequently feeling that crushing tightness and anxiety isn't a permanent, damnable failure. Perhaps it isn't a cause for immense identity-destroying shame. Perhaps that pain is simply an invitation.
An invitation.
An invitation to feel the heaviness, to recognize it exactly for what it is, to stop fighting, to turn around, and to voluntarily step your solar panels back into the light.
The solar panels can always, always turn back to the sun. I love that. We will leave it right there for today. Thank you for shifting gears, slowing down, and exploring this profound text with us. We will catch you on the next deep dive.